Hey everyone, welcome back. I'm the Book Guy. Now, I make a lot of videos where I introduce book series to you, where I take all the good stuff and the bad stuff and present it to you, help you decide if you want to read it. And I realized over the Christmas holidays that I have now done 53 of these introduction videos, covering a total of 368 books. Whew! That's pretty good, right? That's not bad. I'm pretty happy with that. But I do think we've reached the point where now you've probably got a few too many options, right? There's a lot of series out there that you could be trying. So we're going to narrow it down for you today. I'm going to make a top 10 video to give you a good idea of where to get started, give you a few options, okay? I haven't done one of these before, so I'm really excited to sort of, share my personal interest. That's why today's video is unscripted, and you'll see the the true reflection of my vocal abilities. But moving on. So there are two rules for today's top 10 video that I want you to keep in mind. The first rule is it's not a competition. Now I know it's really fun to rank books and compare books and talk about which one's your favorite, but I do want to emphasize that books are fundamentally a work of art, right? They're a source of education, of literature. They improve our emotional health. I don't like reducing them to nothing more than a product for commercial reasons, right? And when we rank them and give them star ratings, we're sort of placing value to a product. I don't necessarily like that very much. I like to remind everyone, as much as possible, that these are works of art and you can just enjoy them in a very subjective, immeasurable way, right? And the second rule, okay, and this is the most important one, is quite literally, I'm ranking these books based on my enjoyment. That's the one measuring stick I'm using here. Okay, so I'm not ranking these books on what I think is objectively the best book, or what is the best bit of writing. This is literally just what I enjoy the most. Okay, that's important to keep in mind because there will be a few upsets on this list. Okay, but I say it all the time. If you read just for enjoyment, you're going to read so much more. Right? And you will enjoy it more, right? Because I think there's a lot of pressure to read the books that everyone says are really brilliant. You might read them and think, I'm not enjoying this, and that's okay. Read what you enjoy. So this is just a purely enjoyment list. All right, with that in mind, let's get started. Number 10 on this list is The World of the First Law by Joe Abercrombie. And I'm really happy we can start with this one today because this is a good example of ranking enjoyment more than objective quality. Because if this was going by objective quality, this series would be a lot higher on this list, right? Because First Law is brilliant. But it's also kind of dark and depressing sometimes, which is why it ended up a little bit lower on the list than I would have liked. But The World of the First Law is grimdark. And as I tell people all the time, grimdark does not mean a blood and guts horror movie. It's about subverting the tropes that we've come to expect in storytelling. So removing the Hollywood gloss, removing all the plot armor that surrounds our main characters. This is sort of the equivalent of looking at someone's Instagram pictures where they're all glossed up and glamorous and posing, and then instead looking through their camera reel, which are probably a more honest, unflattering, realistic depiction of it. This is what the First Law does, but to humanity, right? Rather than seeing heroes who rise up and do great things, we see sometimes unflattering depictions of people who try to be heroes and end up being cowards, or people who thought they were the heroes and end up as the villains. It's a bit more of a messy but realistic depiction of humanity with all the dark, but with also all the light. There's good people in it too. So this series is also great for just subverting a lot of expectations of what we come to expect from fantasy, okay? So it's such an original story on so many levels, and I'll leave it there. It's definitely one of my favorites. So number 9 is The Greenbone Saga. I love this one so much. And this is also a very unique entry on this list. It's the only trilogy, right? Because I like long series. You'll see a lot of long series in today's video, but this one's a trilogy, but it's still on the list because it's that good. The Greenbone Saga is about sort of like a crime family, or almost like a gangster family, if you will, but they hold magic. And it's sort of a brilliant bit of exploration about what magic would look like in the real world if a crime family had hold of it, how they would use their magic to shape economy, to shape business, how they would claim territory. So it's not so much about magic so much as it is about running a business where magic is the product, right? And the world building on this series is just phenomenal. I've never seen anything like it, and I do talk about that quite extensively in its video. But in world building, you want to show how realistic this world is, and you usually try to focus on one or two topics. But in the Green Bone Saga, there are so many topics of world building, right? There's business, economy, government, culture, religion, public conscious propaganda, even Hollywood films that they make about magic to try to improve the people's opinion of it. It's brilliant. But the real strength of this series is the character writing. I've rarely seen such strong character writing all across the board, from main characters to side characters to heroes to villains to anti-heroes. And I think especially the let's call him an anti-hero, Call Hilo, is just about one of my most favorite characters of all time. He's brilliant, and I love him so much. And he's so nuanced and complicated, and there were times I loved him and times I hated him, right? But every single time Hilo was on screen, I'm like, yes, more Hilo, let's do it. So I just enjoy this series so much. My enjoyment is just so high on this one. Moving on. Number 8 is The Expanse. So we got the 9 novels in The Expanse and the 10 short collection. There's also that graphic novel. It came out as a Kickstarter. I only just got it a week ago, and I'm ready to actually read more Expanse. But that's the whole thing. So The Expanse is really special because so much of what we see in science fiction is, well, maybe a little cartoonish, right? Where we shoot lasers, pew, 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 and explosions, right? But this is hard science all the way through. It's a little bit more like The Martian, right? Which uses real world science. What would space exploration actually look like? Do we go to light speed? No. But can we terraform planets? Yeah, possibly. There's developing technology for that. It's about taking what concepts we have on the real world and taking it to the next logical steps. Also, The Expanse is almost like Game of Thrones in space, right? Because it is a little bit gritty. There is a little bit of betrayal and murder and bloodshed and some of the darker aspects of humanity as well. But also, like Game of Thrones, there are true heroes. Like James Holden is a fantastic morally good character who's determined to always be the morally good character, no matter how dark this world gets. The other thing I like about The Expanse is that every book is unique. It's a very unique series where every plot line is different, right? So there's always something new happening. It's very fresh and engaging. But the other thing too is that this whole series, is full of social commentary. There is not a single humanitarian issue that The Expanse doesn't touch on, because it's all about exploring how would expanding into space affect humanity? How would our current problems be magnified by greater distance, by newer technologies? How would Earth prejudices be changed by going into space and having different planetary bases? Would the people on Ganymede face more prejudice than those in the asteroid belt? All sorts of things, and it's profound in all the best ways. But much like the Greenbone Saga, we have the standout character, which is Amos Burton, which I just realized now is quite similar to Hilo, because they're both like extremely complicated, nuanced, but kind of violent characters and anti-heroes who don't mind getting their hands bloodied if that's what it takes. Maybe I should go to see my therapist. But anyway, I could talk about The Expanse all day. That one is number 8. Now, moving on, number 7, we've got The Lord of the Rings and the whole Middle-earth era, epoch, whatever you call it. Now, I want to defend The Lord of the Rings always, but I think there's a bit of a expectation in the book community and in the fantasy community to leave Lord of the Rings in the past. It's had its day, move on, go read something else. I'm like, no, I genuinely think Lord of the Rings stands the test of time in the way that many of the classic books don't. Right? Because Lord of the Rings is, there's so much good about it. I mean, like, we know he wrote all the languages, right? That's sort of the famous thing. We know the world is complicated. We know the Silmarillion and the mythology is very rich and dense and takes a lot of study to understand it and all that kind of stuff. But what we forget is Tolkien had a real gift for characters in a way that we rarely see anymore, because he didn't just write characters, he wrote us into the story, right? Like, we are all Frodo struggling with burdens that feel impossible. We are all Samwise who cares for the people close to us and wants to help. We all long for a Samwise, you know? It's something that speaks to the humanity in all of us. Tolkien had a real gift for that. I think Christopher Lee, the actor who played Saruman, summed it up really well. So he was a huge Lord of the Rings fan. He read the series every year. He met Tolkien himself, big fan. And he summed it up really well, where he said that Lord of the Rings is a story about friendship. And that's the key issue there. And I wholeheartedly agree. It is a story about friendship. And Christopher Lee put it in this way, where the characters who have friends are the ones who are able to endure, and those who have no friends are the ones who fall into corruption and evil, right? And friendship is how we keep ourselves morally good. It's a fascinating concept. So yes, it is a big world, and yes, the languages thing's pretty cool, but I think the heart of The Lord of the Rings is what makes it truly a timeless classic, and it's why I can go back to it over and over and over again. Still, you don't need me to convince you to read Lord of the Rings, right? We know of The Lord of the Rings, okay? But moving on, number 6 is Malazan. Now, I want to be very clear here. This is not just Malazan Book of the Fallen, like the main 10 sequence by Stephen Erickson. This also includes Erickson's prequel series, the Carcatterus trilogy, and the Witness trilogy, the Buchalane and Corbel Broach novellas. Also, all the works by Ian Esmond in the novels of the Malazan Empire and the Path to Ascendancy series. 25 books all up in the Malazan world, and I'm putting all of them on this list because I actually just finished reading the 25th like last week, and I'm like, hell yes, this is one of the best series ever written. I can't rate it higher as much as I would love to. Like, if we were rating this by objective quality, then Malazan would probably be in number 1 spot. Like, in terms of complexity, objective writing quality, and just sheer overwhelming intellectual stimulation, like, wow. It's such a chunky series, but it's also kind of frustrating at times, and the learning curve at the beginning is so steep. It's the hardest series I've ever seen in terms of just getting into it. So it is rough in that sense. And I know everyone's experience here is a bit different. Some people have no problem, others have a little bit of a problem. Like, I struggled with the first book, but by the second book I was into it. But it was really, I don't know, maybe around the 4th book where I felt like I actually started comprehending the majority of it. It's a tough series. But both of these authors are archaeologists and anthropologists, so they're experts in human history, human behavior, how societies work. And Malazan has one of the most realistic depictions of human cultures and how societies work, how empires rise and fall, and how humanity just lives next to each other, right? It's fascinating. Malazan also has a little bit of everything, right? It really is a series that has everything. I mean, you'd hope over 25 books by a certain point, yeah, you'd cover everything, right? So similar to The Expanse, it does touch on literally every humanitarian issue you can think of. But it also comes in many different forms. Like, you have the Bridge Burners, who are a military group, and they're just regular guys trying to do their best job. And then we have, you know, the Tista Andi and the Tista Adur, like Anamanda Rake. And then we have the 4 founding races and the Ascendants and the Azathanai, right? Like, there's so many big concepts next to all the little concepts as well, right? So if you're into the real high fantasy stuff, you've got your big deities there. And if you're into the mundane, normal life, you've got that too, you know. And it's everywhere in between on this spectrum. You know, Malazan really does touch on everything. So it's one of those cases where, like, if you can appreciate the full complexity of life, then yeah, I think you'll really dig into Malazan. And it's something that, like, I don't mean to brag, right? But I felt like I was getting smarter the more I read of it. Right? I mean, like, when I was reading the first couple of books, I was struggling to comprehend. And then around the middle of the series, I was like, I'm getting this. I feel like my brain has expanded to be able to handle this much. You know, like, my comprehension was stretched to a point of improving, right? I genuinely think that if you're looking for a challenge, that Malazan will challenge you like nothing else ever will. That it is one of the most, the pinnacle of fantasy complexity and what storytelling can be. So it's not for everyone. I say it all the time. It's not for everyone. Just because it's so brilliant doesn't mean you're going to enjoy it. Right? It's still number 6 on my list, but I enjoy it now, and I love it, and I can't wait to start rereading. It's like the Golden Gate Bridge, you know? It's so big that as soon as they finish painting it, they got to go back to the start and do it again. right? That's how Malazan works for 25 books. All right, we're halfway through the list, and we're going to get to the first big upset. After Malazan, in the number 5 spot, we have the Dresden Files. Yes, I can feel your hatred. Look, I know, like, objectively, that Malazan is probably a better written series than Dresden Files. But the Dresden Files is probably one of the most enjoyable series I've ever read. I've read it 3 times through because I enjoy it so much. If I was doing this list based entirely on what was the most fun series, the Dresden Files would be number 1, right? It really is so much fun. Okay, so this is what I'm saying. Like, you got to read what is just going to make you happy, right? Your enjoyment is the priority here. And so Dresden Files is number 5 spot. But the reason why I rank it so highly is because it has everything that I love in storytelling. So it's got really good mystery plot lines where you're trying to put together, clues. There's so much intrigue, and there's always a big satisfying plot twist at the end of every book. And I loved reading them through the first time and trying to guess the secret at the end of it. And there was always plenty of secrets. There's just secrets everywhere. So satisfying to see them revealed. There's also a ton of action, like big magical fantasy action. That's always heaps of fun. And there is mythology, right? It's an urban fantasy set in the real world, and it draws from mythology, from Fae, from Greek, Norse, just a little bit of everything. So it really is this great big melting pot. Some of it is original too, so there are some unique monsters in here, like the Outsiders, right? But there's just a little bit of everything. It's such a rich series. Now, look, we also do have to address the fact that there is a little bit of sexualizing women in this series. A lot of people take issue with it. I want to acknowledge it here. So the concept is like, if 2 people walk into a room, the author will describe the guy by his facial expression and his posture, but the woman is described by how hot she is, right? It's that kind of thing. I think everyone will have a different level of what they're comfortable with, but I feel the need to always point that out whenever I'm recommending it to people, because not everyone will like it. But the other thing too with the Dresden Files is they're all very short, right? So this is a great series for people who have not been reading for a while. If I talk to someone who is like, oh, you've got a booktube channel, well, I don't read anything, I'm like, go read the Dresden Files. It's such an easy series to pick up. It's so lighthearted, and you can zip through those books nice and quick. Again, the fun factor is off the charts. This series is also very episodic, so each book is quite standalone and will have a firm ending, but the author is very clever at weaving ongoing plot lines through each book, so it does reward you for reading all of them. So it really is something that helps new readers get into reading and rewards you for reading deeper the more into the series you go. It hurts a little bit that this series is still ongoing and unfinished, and the author is sort of slowing down. We're not hearing as many updates about it, but I don't know. I'm really keen to see more of this one. I'd love to see the conclusion, because I've got my theories. But let's move on from there. In the number 4 spot, we have The Realm of the Elderlings. I love The Realm of the Elderlings so much. It's such a brilliant series, and so underrated. No one talks about this. I swear, I'm planning this year to just do a video on each of the sub-series, because I need to tell people about Realm of the Elderlings. Okay, but what makes the series so good is this is very character-focused fantasy, right? I put this series in the number 4 spot for the simple fact that I think of all the series mentioned today, this has the best character writing. By a considerable margin too. No one does characters quite as well as Robin Hobb. One of the big examples of this is the main character, Fitz Chivalry. So Fitz is the main character in 9 of the books. Okay, so in the first trilogy, he's a young man, so like a child into his late teens. He's very hot-headed and stubborn and reckless, and he makes a few mistakes. In the next trilogy he's in his 30s, where he's a little bit more jaded and disgruntled, but still cares, still striving to do the right thing. And by the time of the 3rd trilogy, he's in his late 50s and even early 60s over the course of it, and he's so much wiser, but also he carries a lot of grief with him by this stage. I have never seen a character arc done as well as Fitz Chivalry. I truly think it's the pinnacle of character arc writing, because we don't just see him on a journey through different emotions or different understandings and philosophies and growing. He literally grows up. So it's not just coming of age, it's also, I don't know, the ending of age, if you will. It's all stages of his life, and we see that growth and change, where he's always the same person, but in like different forms along the way. It's fascinating. But more than that, the series also has what else does it have? So it's got a lot of mystery as well. So we see paintings of scaled creatures on the walls, and we're wondering where the dragons went, and what are the Elderlings, and what are these, mysterious stone formations over there, and, what's all off the edges of the map. There is so much about this world we don't know, and we slowly discover, and it's filled with secrets. It's one of the reasons why it's so compelling to keep reading. But moving back to characters, it's not just Fitzchivalry who has amazing character arcs. Every single character, especially those in the protagonist role, will have an arc of some kind. And what we see very often is characters who look like they're heroes at the start descend into madness and evil, and characters who we think are irredeemable at the start actually get these beautiful redemption arcs. Like, we're talking Zuko level redemption arcs. This series is brilliant at showing how people can change, and that all of us, to some extent, are in a state of flux, where we're always growing in one direction or another, and we have that sort of moral responsibility to try to grow in a good way and to stay as good people. This is another series that touches on literally every humanitarian theme. We have all the representation, so many different types of prejudice discussed and confronted. It can be dark at times with depictions of slavery and sexual assault, but it's also filled with hope and beauty. The big theme of the series is found family. Like, Fitz is a bastard child, and he is adopted into the royal family where he technically belongs by blood, but he's kept as an assassin, sort of an outsider to the family. And yet, over the course of the series, Fitz finds family over and over and over again. That was a good one. Fitz finds family? Yeah, like that. But he has, children of his own, and he has a parental role and a mentoring role to different children as well. And it's a fascinating depiction of what you can pass on to the next generation, even if you didn't have it yourself, It's a series that's full of hope in all the best ways. Also, the final book just breaks my heart. Like, I can't think about the final book without just feeling all the feelings again. But let's move on. Okay, before we get into my top 3 picks and my top 3 podium level series, we're going to do a couple of honourable mentions, because there are a lot of series that I would get on this list if the list went to 14, for example. Okay, we'll do 4 honourable mentions. The first one is The Dark Tower. I desperately wish I could have gotten this on the list, but I couldn't quite get it there. The Dark Tower is a beautiful experiment that pushes the boundaries of what fantasy can be and does a whole bunch of original stuff. This is such original storytelling. It's also weird, right? The idea is that the series takes a lot of risks, right? And some of those risks pay off very well, and others are terrible. Right? I got to admit that. So one of the more risky plot lines is they find a train to hop in. Like, it's a fantasy realm, but they have a train. Don't ask about it. But then the train turns out to be alive and sentient and evil, and it's going to kill them all unless they can solve a bunch of riddles. That's weird, but oh my god, it worked so well. It was brilliant. And then there's the other risk where the characters travel to the real world and they meet the real world Stephen King and yell at him and tell him to hurry up and finish writing the series. That's the weirdest plotline I've ever seen. It does not work. I do not like it at all. I cannot imagine what he was thinking. So, as much as I genuinely love the series, it varies so much in quality that I can't get it on the list. When it's good, it's really good. When it's bad, it's just kind of weird, okay? Great series. I do still recommend it. Couldn't put it on the list. Second honourable mention is the Red Rising series. I'm gutted that I couldn't get this one on the list. But it's a simple fact that the first book is a bit rough, right? The first book is the weakest of all 6. And I think everyone knows that it really is a series where you got to push through book 1 to get to where all the good stuff is. Now, once you get past book 1, it's brilliant. And I wholeheartedly think that Dark Age and Lightbringer, the books 5 and 6, are 2 of the best books I've ever read in my life. They're incredible, right? And the series definitely has this improvement in quality as we go. It just starts so rough, I couldn't quite get it on the list. And even then, the first book isn't bad, it's just sort of okay. It's just sort of okay, yeah. It's nowhere near as good as the rest of the series gets. Still, Red Rising, do recommend it. Third honourable mention is the Lycanius trilogy, which is just so brilliant. Like, the whole time I'm reading it, it's just It's a flawless series in so many ways. The whole concept of Lycanius is it plays around with time, right? There are some people who time travel, but there are also people who look into the future and predict what's going to happen. And then we have characters who are really old and remember the distant past. And all three of these time travel options interact with each other in really clever ways, until you realize only in the very final pages of the book that this complex puzzle all fits together perfectly. It's one of the tightest bits of writing I've ever seen. It's a perfectly executed trilogy like I've never seen ever before. The reason it's not on this list is the character writing is weak. It's such a letdown area, but all of our characters are kind of, I almost want to say like bland one-dimensional characters. You know, I hate to say it because I love that series so much, but there's just not much good character writing. I will say the author James Islington has improved his character writing a lot going into his next series with The Will of the Many. He clearly took a bit of criticism on board and has worked very hard to improve character writing, and we see it there, right? That just didn't get into Lycanius, so I can't put it on this list. Fourth and final honorable mention is Game of Thrones, right? I love Game of Thrones, had so much fun in reading it, and I truly think that Game of Thrones has done incredible things for the fantasy genre. You know, it took us finally out of the heroic fantasy and into a little bit more nitty-gritty and realistic depictions of humanity. We're allowed to show darkness. You know, fantasy is for adults, you know, to some extent. But I can't get it on this list simply because it was a little bit depressing. You know, the bad guys keep winning, the good guys keep dying, and the fact that it's unfinished is just such a soul-crushing fact I just can't seem to look past. But yeah, honorable mention to Game of Thrones. Now, for the top three, this one's a bit tricky. I had to really sort of shuffle these three around a couple of times, and you can guess what they are. Like, they're all behind me, right, on the shelf. They're in the center stage. But anyway, what ended up in the third spot is Wheel of Time. I love Wheel of Time. Wheel of Time got me into fantasy, and it will always be a big one for me. Now, I know sometimes these days we see people be like, oh, you know, grow up and move past Wheel of Time already. Wheel of Time's had its moment. I also, just like Lord of the Rings, I think Wheel of Time should be around forever. Wheel of Time accomplished something that no series had ever done before or ever will again. And that is, Wheel of Time wrote one story. One big story. So if you look at Realm of the Elderlings, it's split into trilogy, quadrilogy, and then trilogy, right? Dresden Files has 17 books, but they're all episodic, right? The Wheel of Time is unique because it is telling one chronological story from start to finish. And no one had ever done it before, and I don't think it'll be done again because stories like that aren't successful. They're not popular. You know, there are stories like that, but they're usually indie. You know, they're like underground books. You'll rarely get a bestseller that does one complete story like this, but Wheel of Time did it. Wheel of Time also accomplished a bunch of things. It gave us the idea of a chosen one who didn't want to be the chosen one. You know, it gave us the protagonist who might be going insane, and we can't trust that protagonist. That hero who could slip into evil at any moment, and the challenge is to keep his humanity. That was very original at the time. Not to mention, too, the fact that only women can use magic. It was always such a trope that the wise old wizard was a man, right? Wheel of Time did something which is so unique, which was give women significant roles in the story. I mean, we can debate how well it was done, but I still think the principle of the thing worked really well. Another thing people say is that the Wheel of Time is it's always juvenile, like it's very much good versus evil, but I don't think that's the case at all. Yes, we do have the Dark One and the army of mindless monsters, the Trollocs, absolutely, but we also have the 14 countries that exist on Randland, and they all have their different rivalries with each other. We have the Aiel, and then the Seanchan, which are just crazy wild cards that have their own sense of morality, especially the Seanchan. Like, if the Dark One is chaotic evil, you'd call the Seanchan lawful evil, which is such a nuanced take. You know, so there's so many different degrees of where the threat is coming from and different degrees of morality. The other big thing, too, is that the Wheel of Time showed that real life was messy. You know, it's something that they talk about in the series a lot, where they say, wow, in all the stories, you know, the hero never had to, you know, find a shoe for his horse or never struggled to find an inn, you know, and it's like that was one of the things that the Wheel of Time did, was it just showed that there is not always that gloss around real life, that real life is messy and unpredictable, and things don't always go to plan. I truly still think that Wheel of Time accomplished something that we don't appreciate it, because now we just take it for granted. You know, but Wheel of Time is just, yeah, phenomenal. I'll move on from there. As for the final two, okay, this one was tricky, and I did go back and forth on these a couple times, but we have settled. Number 2 is Discworld. Okay, Discworld has definitely got to be on the podium, and I'm sad it didn't get number 1, but number 2 is pretty good, okay? So Discworld, 41 books. And again, the reason why this one is so high is because I'm ranking it by enjoyment. Discworld is one of the most enjoyable series you'll ever read. So they are quite episodic, except for the first 2, which are a duology, but literally everything else after that are standalone episodic books. And they are broken down into sub-series based on who the main characters are. So there are 6 books where Granny Weatherwax is the main character, and they make up the Witches books, right? There are 5 books where Death is the main character, and those are the 5 Death books. But they are still quite episodic. The reason why I love Discworld, oh, there's so many reasons. Terry Pratchett was such a wise man. Like, you read these books and you have fun, you laugh, and you have a good time, and then you realize that they taught you incredible lessons about life and how the world works. And these are lessons that are filled with hope. You know, it's not like Grimdark, where you're like, wow, humanity does kind of suck. Discworld is kind of like, humanity sucks, but it also has potential. And it makes you want to believe in humanity again by the end of it, you know? It is quite intense in calling out crimes against humanity and all sorts of threats to human rights that we see all through real life and all through the series. But it also calls on us to advocate for those rights as well. Discworld is all about the empowerment of all people, and it's something that's just a timeless message, and I don't think will ever go out of style. But also the fact that each of these sub-series of Discworld deals with different styles of writing. So the City Watch books are mystery novels, or crime novels, if you will. So they're great if you like crime and mystery, right? The Witches novels are based on folklore and retellings of fairy tales, Shakespeare, all sorts of things. So they're big on mythology and intertextuality and different cultural references. And then the Death books are all about science fiction and high fantasy concepts and the shattering of the realms between space and time. Like, that's the real big epic stuff, right? And they're all broken down into little sub-series, and it shows that Terry Pratchett knew how to write in any genre. He could tackle any issue, he could explore any theme, and he was an absolute master, the likes of which we'll never see again. I truly believe that. I will say, though, the first, I don't know, I'd say maybe the first couple of books on the series, he is sort of figuring out the style a little bit, you know? Some of the jokes are a little bit too wacky in the first couple of books, but then he really settles on it, you know, after a little while. So Discworld will always be a favorite of mine, and I am also planning a reread of Discworld this year, and I want to start making individual series about individual books, because I want to encourage people to read Discworld, because it's such a good series. But anyway, in the number 1 spot is the Cosmere. All right, there we go. Now, why is the Cosmere in number 1 spot, right? Is it because I love hard magic systems? They're all right. Yeah, I mean, they're fun. Some people get really intense about the hard magic systems, like, oh, Brandon Sanderson, hard magic. I'm like, it's cool. Yeah, it's a nice stylistic choice, right? The thing that I love about the Cosmere, I mean, there's many things, but one of the big things is how it does mystery, right? Brandon Sanderson really is a master of mystery. So what he does is, instead of doing what a lot of fantasy authors do and try to shove as much exposition into your face the moment you start the page, is he uses mystery to intrigue you into this world by giving you very carefully considered glimpses into this world and into this universe that draw you in and want to know more. And it's a brilliant way to world build. Yeah, every single plot line in every book has a mystery element to it. So there's always the clues, the build up, the intrigue, and then a world-shattering plot twist. One of my favorite things about reading a new Sanderson book is trying to guess the plot twists, because half the time I can't, because they're just really well done. I really enjoy the series for that reason. The other big thing about the Cosmere is that I think Sanderson had that rare gift that, in many ways, only Tolkien had before him, where he's not just writing characters, he's writing us into the story. Where I think so many of us see ourselves as Kaladin or Shallan or Dalinar, depending on, what our life experience has been like. He writes about all of us, and he has this ability to sort of cut right to the heart of who we are and challenge who we want to be. Stormlight Archive is a life-changing series. Absolutely was for me. It has been for many people, and I think that's the real gift of the Cosmere. So yeah, you can talk about magic system and world building and how big the universe is and all that kind of stuff, but I really think the heart of what I enjoy about it is how well he does mysteries and plot twists, and how well he writes his characters. But the Cosmere is also a lot like Discworld, where because you have those different sub-series, you blend fantasy with all these different genres. The Cosmere does that as well. We do have classic high fantasy, and then we have flintlock fantasy. We have so many different locations and worlds and different types of stories. It really can be a little bit of everything, and I'm loving seeing just a little bit more sci-fi woven into the later books in the series, and I would love to see how far that goes. So I think the Cosmere is also a winner for me for just how much variation there is from book to book. There's so much to explore. You just don't get bored of it because it's always something new and fresh. Still, I could talk about all these books all day, and I'll leave it there. So I hope that gives you a couple of ideas of where you might want to go with your reading, okay? Remember, read for your enjoyment, not for someone else's approval, okay? Don't just copy what other people are reading. Read what you honestly want for yourself, and you will read more often, and you will enjoy it more. So remember, I've also got a bunch of other videos on this channel where I introduce different books. Every video I mentioned today does have a corresponding video I've already covered, or even multiple in a few cases, okay? And there will be a lot more to come. Also, I'll emphasize that this list did not actually include any middle grade or young adult because I'm rating it by my enjoyment. But I want to validate, if you enjoy middle grade and young adult, go read those series, okay? Don't read what I enjoy. Still, you can tell me which ones you agree with or disagree with. I'm very open to hearing about that. I do have a schedule coming up for more books coming in January. We're doing a young adult month, and you can see the schedule right here of books coming up. They'll be dropping every week this month, and I'm hoping to even get a couple bonus ones in there too. Also, next week I will have a new title sequence for 2025. I didn't quite get it in time for today because I'm hiring a musician because I want a very specific sound. Just saying, it's going to be good. It's going to be good. Anyway, my books are coming out next week. So the Kickstarter is being fulfilled. We're shipping out the physical books as we speak. The people who ordered ebooks have got the ebooks now, which is great. If you didn't get your copy, you can order it on the 8th of January. There'll be a link in the description to the website, and that'll go active next week, sort of thing. But they're up. You can support the channel if you want to buy the books. We also have a shop where you can buy merchandise, a Patreon account where you can hang out with me and vote for my content, right? So if you want me to cover a series that you're interested in, let's talk about it on Patreon. That's where we do it. Come on. Alright. Otherwise, like and subscribe. Watch. You can comment on the video and tell me your thoughts, and that'll all boost the channel. I hope this encourages you to keep reading, and I hope it celebrates reading, gets you excited about it again, and I hope this is your best year for reading yet. I hope you enjoy a good book today, and I'll see you next time. Bye!